Thank you very much. All right, it's 2019, and Angular version 20 is huge. Angular bots fetch coffee in the morning. Angular self-driving cars take you to the office. And Angular 3D is used to render the hottest multiplayer VR games. And Amazon Web Services is up and running again. Now close your eyes and imagine what you're doing in 2019. Are you still using Angular? Are you still using this platform-agnostic framework to create really rich user experiences? Maybe. Let's get back to present day for a second. Where is Angular today, and what is it good for in 2017? Well, in 2017, you can do all these things with it. You can create web apps, desktop apps, using Electron, and you can do mobile apps. Now, there's two options for mobile apps. You have Ionic and NativeScript. What is NativeScript? Who thinks it's a language? I thought it was a language when I first heard about it. It's not a language. I'll read this to you so you don't have to. NativeScript is an open source framework for building truly native mobile apps with JavaScript. You can use web skills like TypeScript, Angular, CSS, and get native UI performance on iOS and Android. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff in there. What does that really mean? It means you can build stuff for free, and you can deploy to the app stores for free for iOS and Android. So why do we need another one? Why do we need another cross-platform framework for building mobile apps? We already have Ionic. Well, Ionic is for building hybrid apps. Okay, what that means is you're hosting a web view inside of a native shell. NativeScript try to solve an issue that's inherent to Cordova applications with performance. There's limitations with performance and animations and usability. So that's what NativeScript is trying to address, still allowing you to create JavaScript applications. So what do you get with NativeScript? You get a rich, animated, no-compromise native UI. If you go to the app stores, you can search for NativeScript, and you'll be able to download some examples. You can reuse your skills. Here you see that you have the ability to reuse your skills and use the tools that you know and love. Ease of doing native things. What does that mean? So not only do you get out of the box widgets that are built that wrap native elements, you get a lot of them out of the box, but if you need to talk to native APIs, you can do that right in your JavaScript code. It's very cool. Also, NativeScript has a huge growing community worldwide, and Progress Software offers enterprise support for NativeScript if needed. Who's awake? Pop quiz time. Question for you guys. Who here is an Angular developer? Okay, so like almost 100% of you. Who here is a mobile app developer? Native mobile app developer? Okay, all right. So that was a little bit of a bait question. Now, the reason I asked that is all of you that raised your hand for the previous question can now raise your hand for this question. So that's a big claim. Why am I making that claim? Can you just take your Angular web code and plop it down into your native application and everything will be just fine and everybody will be happy? Can you use the same code? Well, you can use a lot of the code, but not everything. And we'll talk about what the difference is, and I'll show you examples of this in the demo. So what is different? Okay, there are a few differences, and here they are. Some of these are small, some of these are bigger. The biggest difference is markup, and I'll show you that. When you're bootstrapping your application, can everybody see that? Okay, you're you're using a different function. So in the browser, you're using platform browser. In NativeScript, you're using platform native. Okay? Then in the main module in the platform, you're using the browser module in the browser, and you're using NativeScript module in NativeScript. So you see a little pattern here? You're replacing one line with another, basically. So the markup is the biggest difference, as I mentioned. In the browser, you have HTML elements. You have the DOM. And in NativeScript, you have your native markup. So there's no DOM. I like to call this NSML. Okay, here's some examples of what that looks like. So the equivalent in HTML and the equivalent in NativeScript. Forms is another swap. We have the Forms module in Angular, and we have the NativeScript Forms module in NativeScript. And routing, we have the Angular router for the web, and we have a special router that wraps the Angular router for NativeScript and offers a few more functionalities that are native related. So let's take a look at the code, and I'll show you, hopefully everything will work. Okay, so I already have NativeScript installed, and I'm going to create a project. And this is the NativeScript CLI. I'm going to call project TOH, Tour of Heroes, and I'm going to pass in the ng flag. So that's going to give me a NativeScript Angular application. Right away, I want to point out a few things that I've mentioned before, the differences for you. So here we have the platform NativeScript dynamic function, which is used to bootstrap the main app module. So in the browser, you have the regular the browser dynamic function, and here you have the NativeScript one. And in the main app module, we're also importing the NativeScript module instead of the browser module. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and execute tns run iOS, and since I'm on a Mac, this will go ahead and boot up the iOS emulator. Now, all these CLI commands are exactly the same, whether you're on a Mac or on Windows. And all the code is exactly the same as well. So there's our simulator, and our app is starting up. Now, my goal tonight is to show you the Tour of Heroes application. Okay, so hey, there's our app. It's up and running. This is the template. Everybody familiar with the Tour of Heroes application on Angular.io? Very cool. Okay, so we're going to be going through a lot of this, not everything, but we're going to go up to routing. Let's start with the hero editor. Okay, so we do have the app component already, and I'm just going to go ahead in here and copy this title and paste it in. Now, this is calling for an H1, and as I've mentioned, markup is completely different, okay, in NativeScript. So instead of an H1, we're going to be using something else. So this is the biggest difference in NativeScript, is the markup. So in NativeScript, we have something called a label, and a label has a text property on it, which we can data bind to the title. Okay? And since we have automatic syncing going on for us automatically, we get this update in the background. So the TypeScript gets built, and we get an update. So this is a completely native view and a completely native label. It gets turned into a UI label for those that are familiar with iOS development. So this abstraction right here gets turned into the native equivalent. In iOS, it's UI label. In Android, it's widget dot something. I forgot, excuse me for that. So let's keep going. We need a hero object, which is our model that we're going to be using for the rest of this demo. Let me go ahead and do hero.ts and paste that in there. And our hero has an ID and a name. Okay, we're also going to need a whole list of heroes later on, so I'm going to just do that right now. And these are our mock heroes. Okay, the reason I have my own list is because I have more than the Tour of Heroes sample, so I can show you scrolling and how smooth it is in native world. Okay, so there's that. Let's see what's next on the agenda here. We have a hero instance that we need to create in our app component. So let's go do that. There's our hero. And in order for TypeScript not to complain, we need to import hero. So there's hero. We're going to import that from the hero module. Okay. So now we have a community member, Nathan Walker. He created these really cool snippets. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to use a snippet here, and it makes me type really fast. Hero.name. Okay, so now we should see a title and a hero.name, but we don't see the title and hero.name. So the reason for that is in NativeScript, you need to define your UI with the root element, and the root element is usually some kind of layout. So I like to use a stack layout, which is the most foolproof layout. Stack layout basically acts as like an unordered list in HTML. Stacks one right on top of another. So let's do that. And we have Tour of Heroes, and we have the name. Now, when you go ahead and create an application and you use a template, you don't have to use a template, but I use the template. You get this theme that gets imported automatically for you. Okay, this is another NPM package. And this theme comes with a bunch of pre-built styles that you can use. So we use CSS in NativeScript to style our application. So I'm going to add a class to our title, and it's just going to be an H1 class. Okay? So that's going to make our hero's title much larger. Cool. What's next? Next is editing our hero. So in HTML, we have an input. We can edit the input. So in NativeScript, there is no input, but we do have a text field. Okay, hint is the equivalent of a placeholder. So let's go ahead and bind the text to the hero.name property and see what happens. Okay, we have a label up here, and we have text field, but it's not editing the first one. Does anybody know why? One-way binding by default, thank you. So we need to activate two-way binding. How do we do that? Has anybody heard of banana in a box? ng model. Okay, so we need to use ng model, and we need to bind hero.name using ng model. Now, this is not going to work right away because there's one more difference, and that's forms module. So we need to import forms module in order for forms to be activated. And in NativeScript, there is no forms module, but there is a NativeScript forms module. So let's go ahead and get that in there. Don't forget to import it. And let's save it. Okay, cool. Now we have two-way data binding. All right. Moving on. The road we've traveled. Okay, we're done with that part. We're moving very quickly, I understand, but there's very limited time. So we already have a list of heroes. We have a longer list of heroes. So what we're going to be doing in section 3 is displaying these lists. In HTML, we have a UL with a class of heroes, but in NativeScript, we're going to be importing heroes from the mock heroes. If you remember, I created the mock heroes right here. We're exporting this heroes array, So I'm going to import that here. And when a component goes through its life cycle, there's an ng on init that gets fired. Okay, so in that event, we're going to have a local heroes property that we're going to set that heroes that we're hard coding. And the local heroes is just going to be an array of hero type. So we have the heroes, we're hard coding it, but now we need a way to display the heroes. So how would we do that? A UL in HTML would be, a stack layout would be a good choice in NativeScript. So let's do that. Now I'm also going to wrap this stack layout here in a scroll view, so we can scroll. This is this is a native app, so we have limited space. We can't just infinitely scroll unless we specify that we want to scroll. So we're putting it in a scroll view, and we're iterating through the heroes array using the ng4 directive. Okay, and inside this grid layout is another layout type where we can have sections. Okay, so we have a badge, which is the ID and the name. Okay, so just to show you the application here, here are the heroes. This is what we want it to look like. We want it to have a badge, and we want the name. Okay, so let's save that. And there they are. Okay, but we need to style them, right? Because they're pretty ugly right now. Let's go ahead and give it some styles. And you don't want to watch me typing styles. It's kind of embarrassing, so I'm going to paste it in. So I'm doing everything in line in this code in the app component class, but it would be probably wise if you have that many styles to put it in its own file. Okay, so let's go save that and take a look. Cool. So now we have everything styled. We have a list. We can scroll through it. What's the next step? Okay, there's styles. Now we need to be able to select a hero. So in HTML, we have a click event. Okay, we have a click event, and we have a click handler, which is onSelect. Let's go ahead and add the onSelect handler here. But in NativeScript, we don't have a click event. What we have is a tap event. There's different events you can hook up to the views. One of them is tap, which seems appropriate here because you want to tap and select that hero. When the hero gets tapped, this event gets fired, passes in the hero, and we're going to set the local selected hero to the passed in hero. Cool. Okay. Also, I want to show you this. This works exactly the same way. So you have a property binding. You have class.selected. So the selected class only gets applied when the current hero is equal to the selected hero. And that's how you get that styling to be different. Okay? So we can also still edit it. And notice the two-way binding flowing through the whole app. Very cool. Okay, so that's master detail. What's next? Next is multiple components. So we need a hero detail component. Okay, we want to extract this little bit up here into its own separate child component. How do we do that? Well, I've already went ahead and prepared some more components that we're going to need for the rest of the demo. And there's a few of them. There's no time to type them all out. So I'm going to copy them in. And I'm going to go through them right now. Okay, so I've got a few more in there. There's the hero detail component. Okay, we're going to hook this up. So what the hero detail component does is accept and input the hero as an input from the parent component. So we're going to indicate and data bind which the selected hero from the parent, and we're going to import it into the hero detail component. So you have to use this input decorator in order to do that. Let's go back here. We're replacing this label and a text field with our new My Hero Detail selector. And only if I could pipe, that would be great. And we're going to data bind the hero property to the selected hero. So this whole part up here is now the child component. And we can do the same kind of selection. When we select, we set a new selected hero. It gets passed into the child and propagated to the property that way. So as you can see, the two-way data binding still works. We have a slightly different styling on the name, but that's okay. Okay, next section, services. Now services is probably the most reusable part you can use here. So you can just copy and paste straight out as long as it's not touching the UI. Okay, let's take a look at that. So we have the service is injectable, and we have a getHeroes property function that returns a promise. The promise contains the array of heroes. Okay, so here's our service. It's injectable. We have a getHeroes function that returns the heroes that's hard-coded. Okay, so instead of hard-coding in this app component, we're going to grab those heroes service. Is it hero service? Okay, hero service. And we're going to inject the hero service into our app component. How do we inject? Through the constructor. Okay. So now we have access to the hero service. We can simply use that in our initialization function. Of course, we need to say this. And we need to get the heroes. That returns a promise, so we have a then handler. We have heroes. And we're going to set this heroes, the heroes that we get back. So if I did everything correctly, nothing should change, right? But we can pat ourselves on the back now because we don't hard code stuff. Now everything comes back from the hero service. And the hero service can decide, do you want to fetch the data from the mock data? Do you want to fetch it from HTTP somewhere? So that's good. All right, now routing. Routing is probably the most complex piece of this because in NativeScript, you can not only do the routing the way you do in Angular, but you also have the option to do some more things that are native, very native-y, to use that word again. Okay, so let's get to routing. What do we need to do in routing? First of all, we're going to turn the app component into a shell. The app component is just going to have a couple of links in it going to the dashboard and the heroes component, and it's going to host the other component with a router outlet. Okay, so just to show you what that's going to look like, there's the new app component. We're still going to have a title, we're going to have a router outlet, and this is going to be our native stuff here. Okay, and just to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste that in. Okay, so we still have our heroes title. We have a little bit of styling. And there's the router outlet. Now here, I want to go over the final differences. We have NS router links instead of regular router links. And I'll go over what that does in a second. And our routing is defined exactly the same way. We have our routes exactly identical. But the difference here is we're importing the NativeScript router module, which adds a little bit of magic. So what do we have in the results? We have a dashboard. Okay, we can go to the details, but the details is not ready yet. And we have a list of heroes. We can switch between these pages. Also, the details are not going to work here. So why are the details not working? Because we still have the input, the hero expecting an input, or the details expecting a hero input. Now, when you navigate to the hero detail page, you get past an ID. So it's the responsibility now of the hero detail component to go to the hero service and grab that hero with that ID. And when we do that, now we can navigate okay? So now we can select one of these, navigate to the details, and navigate around. So that's great, okay? Everything is working fine, but there's something missing, right? What's missing? There is not a very native feel about this. All this stuff is very web-like. So how do we get it to feel more like a native application? Well, in a native app, you usually have some kind of navigation bar. And in NativeScript, you have the ability to create an action bar instead of a stack layout. Okay, so an action bar can have icons, or it can have action items inside of it. So let's grab these and turn them into action items. Now, an action bar doesn't need to be hosted inside of a stack layout. So I'm going to put it outside. And we don't need the title anymore. I'm going to replace that. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so now we have the native navigation bar at the top where we can switch between dashboard and hero pages, and everything else works exactly the same way. So what are we missing? We're missing a title. We can add a title. We can do the same thing here. We can data bind it to the title property. And also we can position our links. So let's put the dashboard on the left. Let's put the heroes on the right. Oh, you don't need a minus there. iOS.position. So that indicates it that it's an iOS property, right? So we can have Android.position, and we can position it differently in Android. So here's our title at the top. We have heroes on the right, dashboard on the left, and everything else works exactly the same way. Yet still, we can do a little bit better. The magic of the NativeScript router, right? I was talking about that. How does native feel when you're navigating on your phone? So by adding this page router outlet, it's an extra option you can do that the NativeScript router offers you. Just by doing that change, you're able to get all this navigation for free now. So now, get the back button up here, you get the animation of switching pages, and you also get this kind of a stack that you flip over and navigate that way. So you can see the data binding working even through the stack. You can even do a page transition. And you can choose between the different native transitions that are available. So I'm going to do flip, for example. Save that. And take a look at when I press heroes, it's going to flip over. Okay? So that takes us to the routing. I'm not going to go into HTTP right now, but that gives you a great, hopefully a good idea of what we can do with NativeScript and how easy it is to convert your web applications, your Angular web applications, to native applications. And you can do the exact same stuff, by the way, in Android.
What happens to that iOS call on Android?
that gets ignored on Android. So if you want to position stuff in Android, you would use Android.position.
But you have a different unit, or you put a switch in the code?
Yeah, you can position it left or right on Android.
About the code itself. Do you put a switch in the code, or you
So-
put a different unit that you create for Android?
So the question is, do you create a different unit for Android? So all the different options you have for CSS files, for JavaScript files, you can prepend them with iOS or Android and have different functionalities available to you. So just to finish up, NativeScript might not be able to get you coffee in the morning, and Angular might not be able to get you coffee in the morning in a couple years. But at least today, you know you have the power to be able to go create native mobile apps with native feelings, with a native feel, okay? I don't know if apps have feelings yet, but I'm sure by 2020 they will. So if you start with NativeScript and Angular today, you'll be ready to go to the future with it. If you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out my PluralSight courses on NativeScript, the basic one there, and then the more advanced animation techniques. Okay, I want to thank Google for hosting, and thanks for the organizers.